Hi everybody, I wanted to do a quick video about what games you can play on the Xbox Series S. Now, this may seem a little bit obvious, but it can be a bit confusing because there's three kinds of games you can play on the Xbox Series S. And so, let's have a look at what they are. So the first thing is all of your old Xbox One games, apart from ones that use like the Kinect peripheral, and obviously ones that are on disc, because the One S doesn't have a disc drive. So you must have bought them digitally, so you can play them on. Now remember though, you're playing these through backwards compatibility, because when you turn on your S or your X, because the operating system is the same as it used to be, same as it is on the Xbox One, you can kind of get fooled into well, isn't this just a beefed up Xbox One? But it's not. No, this is a different console. With a lot different stuff going on behind the scenes. So these games from the Xbox One era, they're playing in backwards compatibility mode. And same for the Xbox 360 games that Microsoft made compatible with the Xbox One. They will play, but again, as long as you've got the digital version, because there's no disc drive, and there's even some original Xbox games that do that as well. Now, you'll hear a lot of stuff about how these games will run better, and lots of them do. Lots of them do, because, again, you're playing these Xbox One games on new hardware. However, not all of them perform significantly better. For example, I was playing Hunt Showdown, and definitely with Hunt Showdown, it wasn't running at 60 frames a second, which I kind of expected it to do in compatibility. It wasn't running at 60 frames a second. It was running probably just over 30 frames a second. And so there's probably going to be quite a few games. Another one was Behemoth Interactive's Looter Shooter Vigor. That definitely was not running at 60 frames a second. Nowhere near. It was running at 30 frames a second. It felt just like playing it on the Xbox One or the PlayStation 4. In fact, sometimes these games, when you're still, they look better because you're getting better resolution, but you're not getting a better frame rate. And one of the most important changes with the new consoles is a better frame rate. So it will play those games, and some of them will play a lot better. So, for example, games like Battlefield 1, Battlefield 5 play amazing, even though there's been no fiddling around with them. They're just playing in backwards compatibility mode. Now, the next style of games are the FPS Boost games. Now, there's only a handful of these as of March 2021, but these are games that Microsoft have been able to kind of go under the hood of and increase the frame rate to 60 frames a second. So a good example of this is Sniper Elite 4. So Sniper Elite 4 probably ran at about 30 frames a second on Xbox One and PlayStation 4. On Xbox One S, it runs at 1080p, 60 frames a second, and looks fantastic. It really does. It is very, very special indeed. And they've done the same with like Fallout 4, Fallout 76, Far Cry 4. I mean, there's a few more. And I guess what you're probably seeing is games that go into Game Pass are probably going to get this treatment, because they've got to do quite a lot of testing to make sure it works. So you get those games. And then finally, you get the games that are optimized for the Xbox Series X and S. So these are basically games that have got two versions. You've got the Xbox One version, and then you've got the Xbox Series S, Series X version. Of course, at the moment, there are no titles that are purely for the Xbox Series X or Series S. There's not a single one that will only play on those consoles. In fact, we won't be seeing games like that probably, for 2 or 3 years. Well, when do I reckon? 2 years, I think, probably, because the install base for PlayStation 4s and Xbox Ones is so absolutely massive that publishers just can't ignore them. And if you take Call of Duty, for example, if you think about the release Call of Duty for the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One was Ghosts, wasn't it? And so there was a Xbox 360, PlayStation 3 version of Ghosts, and a PlayStation 4 and Xbox One version of Ghosts. Then we went forward a year, and then it was Advanced Warfare. And Advanced Warfare came out on Xbox 360 and PS3 and Xbox One and PS4, and run well on all of them. It was run well on all of them. It wasn't until we went to Black Ops 3 that you had the full versions on PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, and then PS3 and Xbox 360 just got like a stunted version from a different developer that was okay, but it was nothing like the full version. And then you went forward another year. From Black Ops 3, we went into Infinite Warfare, and that's it. There was no Xbox 360 or PlayStation 3 version of those games. It was purely the next gen. So that was really 4 years after release, wasn't it? So at the moment, optimized for Series X and S games. Obvious examples would be games like Call of Duty Black Ops, Cold War, where if you bought the cross-gen pack, only if you bought the cross-gen one, you would then get access to the PlayStation 4 version and the PlayStation 5, or the Xbox One version and the Xbox One S and Xbox One X version as well. There's lots of Microsoft games that are like that. So Forza, for example, is one. State of Decay, actually, that is optimized as well. And then you've got Xbox Smart Delivery. So the idea of Smart Delivery is that the console will make sure you get the correct version of the game. There's a lot of confusion apparently on PlayStation 5 where people are downloading the PlayStation 4 versions of games and playing them, not realizing that there's a PlayStation 5 version that they could be downloading, so they're not getting the full effect. I guess the other thing I should mention as well is, what about the difference between Xbox X Series X games and Xbox Series S games? Well, I think this is the hidden secret of the Xbox Series S, in the fact that although there's, if in terms of teraflops, the Xbox Series S has got 10 teraflops and the Xbox Series X has got 16, so that seems a lot more, doesn't it? You've got to remember that the Series S is really aimed at people like myself who are just going to be running it off of 1080p TVs at 60 frames a second, or maybe a gaming monitor at 1440 at 60 frames a second, or maybe some at 120 if it'll do it, 140 if it'll do it. And the Xbox One X needs the extra power, needs those 16 teraflops to run true 4K at 60 frames a second. That's the thing that's very, very difficult. And the Series S will do that with certain titles as well. A lot of that will depend on how good the developer is at getting familiar with getting the most horsepower out of these consoles. But that's kind of the secret. So that's why there doesn't really need to be a difference. That's why there won't be an Xbox One version of a game, an Xbox Series S, and Xbox Series X. What there may well be, though, is that Xbox Series S versions of games could well be smaller, because the Series S version will have the 1080p graphical bits in it rather than the 4K ones, because it's 4K graphics that really take up a lot of hard drive space, for example. So maybe that's why the 500 gig hard drive on the S isn't as bad. But I would always recommend, if you do get an S, get yourself an external SSD card. I've got a 1 gigabyte one, so that you can copy titles backwards and forward if you need to, but you can run all your old titles, your Xbox One titles and Xbox 360 titles, off that SSD, and leave the super fast internal SSD for the games that are dedicated to it and simply have to run off it. Because some of the if we take a step backwards, actually, if we talk about the backwards compatibility Xbox One games and Xbox 360 games, they will run off an external SSD, no problem. Probably run off an external HD, actually, if you want to go cheap that way. The FPS Boost games will run off an external SSD as well, or HD, but get an SSD. But the optimized for Xbox Series X and S games, most of them, Microsoft say all of them, you have to run them off the internal SSD. However, State of Decay 2 ran optimized off my external SSD. So you'll have to see what that happens. So there we go. That's the games that you can play on your Xbox One S. The three main types. The majority of the games at the moment are going to be backwards compatible Xbox One games that are running backwards compatibility mode. Many of them will run better. Some of them won't run significantly better unless either the developer does something about it, or they become involved in the Xbox FPS Boost program, where they'll then be boosted to 60 frames a second or even more. And then we have the optimized for Xbox Series X and S games, which are the ones that are, at the moment, will be coming two flavors, because they'll still be making them from the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4. and then in 2 or 3 years' time we'll move to a situation where you won't be able to buy those games, and they'll be purely for the Series X and Series S, and the PlayStation 5. Okay, so hopefully that clears things up a bit. I just wanted to discuss it because, again, I think the confusion comes down to the fact that the Xbox consoles look so familiar. They look so similar to each other, and the operating system looks so similar that you could be forgiven for thinking that, well, it's just, it's got more RAM, it's got a better processor, but in essence it's the same console. Well, it's not. No, this is a different thing, and those older Xbox One games are playing in backwards compatibility mode. Anyway, that's enough from me. If you've got any questions and comments about this, put them in the box down below. If you like the video, hit like. If you want to see more of the same, press subscribe, and I'll see you again soon.